Welcome back to Car-Pinionated, our weekly and slightly irreverent talk about cars, the car industry, and driving in general. I'm Doug Stewart, Senior Digital Content Producer for Fox 61 in Hartford. Joining me is Jeff Buckles, writer and editor at WBBM Chicago. And from beautiful Fairfield County, Connecticut, Glenn Packman, improv comedy stylist and fellow car enthusiast. So this week, gentlemen, we are talking about the oncoming ban of internal combustion engine cars, which starts in California, and the idea is that after 2035, car manufacturers won't be able to sell these cars. So, by way of a little background, a lot of the Northeast states in the early 2000s adopted California emissions regulations and just wholesale and without compromise or without controversy, they went ahead and did this. So when California now, the California Air Resources Board makes a pronouncement that they're not going to sell, they're not going to allow internal combustion engine cars to be sold after 2035, that then has a ripple effect down the state. And in Connecticut, through a series of things that the way the legislation has to go through a committee and then be passed by the legislature. And a lot of people rose up and said, we don't want this. We don't want your stinking electric cars. We're going to go off in our own direction. And it leads me to wonder, is the ban a good thing? Is it does it come too quickly? Is there alternatives that people should be thinking about rather than just say cut them off completely? Glenn, I'm going to go to you first. What are you thinking?
We're going to have to venture into politics, unfortunately, because that's where this is all going to root. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a very politically motivated discussion. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that there's one side that says no to electric vehicles and the other side that says yes. And I think there's a lot of animosity between the two sides, obviously. And it's becoming one of those issues where everyone is digging their heels into the sand. I guess for me, it comes down to two things. One, climate change, and two, freedom. The freedom to buy whatever we want, the freedom to consume the way we want, which is so much of what the US is built on. I mean, we are a fiercely capitalistic society, but on the flip side, the things that are being sold are also bad for our environment and the world. And there's evidence to that fact. So what's more important is what it comes down to. What is more important to everyone out there? And that's where this is going to be such a divisive issue. There's going to be people who say it is more important for me to buy whatever I want. Or someone else is going to say it's more important to me to protect the planet for my kids and my grandkids and people that come after me. I think that's what it all comes down to at the end of the day, at least in my addled little mind. And I'm on the fence on these because I would love for us to be able to have combustion engine cars available until the end of time, but I also think we definitely need to do things about climate change. There's no dress rehearsal for this. It's happening, and we need to do something about it. So it's going to be a divisive topic. You're going to get somebody who's going to say, well, they're doing all this just to be the party that makes us do things we don't want to do. And then there's going to be other people who say, well, we have to do something or we're all going to die. How do we please both? We don't
reconcile that.
Yeah. What's that?
How do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no way of connecting the two sides of this issue, unfortunately. Which side do I fall on? Previously I would have definitely said I'm on the combustion engine side, but they're making electrics better and better every day. The prices are coming down. These are the cars of the future, in my mind. So I kind of have to register in that camp. That being said, we do need to make immediately a very hard look at what batteries are going to do to the planet, because there's a lot of people who say, oh yeah, well, okay, so we're not dumping chemicals into the air, but we're creating things that don't biodegrade at the same time. So such a complex issue. I wish I could sum it up in less than 10 minutes, but I can't. My personal vote, though, is let's get on with getting serious about electric cars.
Jeff?
In the history of the United States, there has only ever been one constitutional amendment that has ever been repealed. And it was the one that banned the sale of something. Of course, that was alcohol.
Yeah.
Anytime that this country attempts to ban a substance or ban a product, it doesn't go well. It's anathema to the American system of commerce and capitalism, which, as Glenn pointed out, is largely summed up as, we buy whatever the heck we want. We're Americans. That's how this works. A lot of technological change can happen in 12 years. A lot of regime change can happen in 12 years. By 2035, we will have had how many? 4, 28, 32. We will have 3 presidential elections. And the well-meaning guidepost by the Biden administration to eliminate sales of internal combustion vehicles by 2035 is a goal rather than an edict, I think, and is frankly really likely to be repealed, because unlike car makers, auto unions, and other interested groups, the earth does not have a lobbyist. Also, the very real concern about climate is not off the table at all. The COP28 conference just wrapped up in Dubai here a month or so ago. A friend of mine was there covering it, and everybody seems to be agreed that we're blowing right past 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming annually. Or whatever the thing is, we're pretty much full on to 2. So the tipping point may have already arrived. Glenn's certainly right about that. I'm not going to get into how I feel about it specifically, but I'll hazard a guess that 2035 date is going to get moved back and back and back. And also you'll see plenty of loopholes for that. Large commercial vehicles, trucks and SUVs. There'll be carve-outs on that for sure that will have an effect of watering down whatever ban occurs. And my guess is what will happen is that instead of a ban on sales, you'll see tariffs, you'll see increased taxes, you'll see other ways to discourage purchase of certain vehicles and encourage the purchase of other vehicles, much like the current tax credits that are offered occasionally, depending on where you grab the tax code and if you can buy it in time to purchase electric vehicles.
But also not to completely, but the gas guzzler tax.
Well, yeah, right. Which people seem perfectly happy to pay, I guess. We used to think it was a bad thing, and then all of a sudden, Chrysler started putting 700 horsepower V8s in family sedans, and people just said, "Okay, $1,000, no big deal," because everything is too expensive.
Because I have it on a 7-year loan. What the hell?
Yeah, well, oh my gosh, that's so true. And a 2035 signpost is a great idea, and it's something to strive for. This country's not going to be ready for that in 12 years. It's just not. and it requires a huge investment in charging stations, power grid enhancements, dealer networks, and a whole bunch of other things that we haven't even really begun to contemplate as a country. Stuff that doesn't make for great sound bites and doesn't make for great talking points on cable, but in fact, as Glenn points out accurately, is incredibly important to the future viability of the country and the planet. So California will probably be in the forefront on that, and maybe some other outlying states will, but this is a big, beautiful country, and people who like driving what they want to drive, and people should be able to drive what they want to drive, I think. But ultimately, it's going to come down to who's got what the march of technology looks like in however many years it is, and who's got the most highly paid lobbyists.
I think a couple things. I think that, and we mentioned this last week in last week's show about how the plug-in hybrids are sort of the gateway drug. You said that, Jeff. And I think that finding some carve out for that kind of vehicle that is both things, let's call it the Toyota philosophy. Because that's what they make, and they do it well.
They have been the most successful at it, for sure.
And so finding that kind of way to because honestly, if I didn't buy an electric car and I had a plug-in hybrid, I could probably get through most of my driving day on electric power. And then I'm not, but I'm also not worried about range anxiety. So I think that I think is part of it. But the other thing that, I say this all the time, there used to be a buggy whip industry in this country. That these, that some markets, some products, some markets get left behind just because of the march of time. Okay. And adapt and survive, I think, is part of it. Listen, I'm living proof. I was for a number of years, I was a TV news videographer, and now I work on the web because I realized that at some point that wasn't going to be the thing that was going to keep paying my salary. The other thing that I think is interesting is I get why the government wants to do this. I get why the government says, here's our goalpost. This is where we got to get to. Okay. Because the government has done it before. World War II was a prime example. The space program as a prime example, where they said, this is where we want to be. This is how we're going to get there. And we got to do this. And so as the kind of defining characteristic of what America does, the government perhaps has to do something in this process and saying it out there. And maybe it's ambitious, maybe it was ill-considered, maybe there's a lot of things, but it's something that has to happen at some point. Something has to change, whatever that something is. And then and if you let it up to if you let it to the oil industry and the car manufacturers and everything like that, I don't think you're ever going to get there. And for example, one red line in LA, and the LA used to have a really great public transportation system. Was it called the Red Line?
I don't remember. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
right.
I think it was the Red Line, the blue line.
The trolleys that crisscrossed.
Trolleys,
yeah.
Very efficiently.
Go watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Then it's all part of that.
There you go.
So because that's what happens when industry gets involved in making those decisions. one of the many things. So, but yeah, I think, but you mentioned it. The infrastructure has to change. The people's perceptions of it, the technology, all have to be part of this change that comes about. It's going to be interesting in Connecticut specifically to see what happens, because now, do we get out of the California regulations or not, or what? It remains to be seen.
Yeah.
And let's also remember, and this is not a small factor here, this country employs thousands of people in the job of oil and gas exploration.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What happens to those people?
Yep.
I mean, obviously, fossil fuels are still going to be required for home heating, for airplanes, for heavy equipment and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But if you say you can't buy a new internal combustion engine vehicle after 2035, what does one do with these people? They can't all build solar panels, right? That's a question that no one really has a great answer for yet.
Yeah.
I do. They start working on the web. I'm just sorry, a little callback there. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Not at the expense of Doug. We want Doug to keep
No.
eating.
Yeah. I'm just kidding.
I got a short runway to go, and then I can retire. So
Right.
this is,
That's right.
So, I would love, personally, if this whole issue ended up being like the issue of chlorofluorocarbons just a few years ago, where spray cans were disintegrating the ozone layer. And it must have been just a more accepting time when people actually believed in science, because scientists came forward and said, yeah, these silly spray cans of your product are burning a hole in the ozone layer and it's going to kill us all. And so everybody on the planet outlawed chlorofluorocarbons. But what they did was they came up with spray products that were just as good, that didn't have them in it at the same price. So it wasn't like we were depriving anybody of anything. We were giving them an option that was just as good. So why not use it? It had to be one of those things where you couldn't even evoke that knee-jerk reaction about, oh, I want to be able to buy what I want. It just, oh, okay, it's just as simple as doing this. Okay, then I got to do that. Now, the problem is that the auto industry is never going to be that simple. There's no way of making it that cut and dried. But in a perfect world, it would be. And I guess what that's all leading up to is, I think we need to make it easier on people to get into an electric car, to not worry about driving too far without running out of electricity, to make sure that they're comfortable in driving them, and that's not going to be easy to do. It's definitely not going to be easy to do. So it's not fluorocarbons, unfortunately.
And the same thing happened with Freon in car air conditioners.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, the air that, the cold air that came out of my Dodge Shadow, the vents in my Dodge Shadow, was the same whether it was the new Freon or the old Freon.
Right.
And right. You have to have to make that transition as graceful and as seamless as possible for people. And if batteries charge faster and they could charge it at places more often than at more places, rather than just the amount of places, because it's going to be really interesting to see what's going on at this Tesla supercharger around the corner when every electric vehicle can charge there. That's going to be an interesting day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's going to make this just 10 times worse, and what I alluded to before, is that this has already become a political issue that people are treating like a hill to die on, And I think a lot of it is people getting overly worked up on something that we just need to explore logically and scientifically. And there's people out there who just have no interest in logic or science, and that's bad. That's really bad. The centrist has spoken. That's all I have to say.
All right. Well, that brings us to another close of another week of Car-Pinionated. If you have comments, please email me at dstewart@fox61.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can watch previous episodes on YouTube. Remember to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.